Yeah. First are not too bad.
Yeah.
What do you have to punch in?
Lowell.
Yeah.
The accident on Route 2, but you know, that recommends why. Expected.
But one you over there, yes, yeah, sure. Very good. I'd like to call the meeting, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Betsy, we're calling the meeting to order.
Okay.
6:30. Okay, since we have such a large crowd, we probably don't need to have enhanced microphone and so forth and so on. Can everybody hear well enough to think?
It's catching on the closed captions, so I'm
Hey, just some ground rules. First, we have to approve our minutes, and then we're going to continue the hearing. We will leave energy for an application, otherwise known as and initially, we're going to have some questions and try to go over changes that have been made in the original NOI. Then we'll have some comments to make ourselves and questions. And then we'll open it up to questions you may have out there. And I'm going to limit it to 5 minutes each person. If we can you get more than one turn if you want, but we'll just 5 minutes initially. And so just get through this in a reasonable amount of time. So with that, I think the first order of business is to approve the minutes of the December 17th meeting.
I'm where we accept the minutes of 15.
Second. And third.
Any discussions? All in favor?
Aye.
Carried. So we're opening the hearing again, and Brendan, do you want to go over some of the changes you made and your whole?
Yeah, that's one. You have one.
A little bit limited space, let's tuck back here and I want to see. Again, for the record, Brandon Smith, the energy here with Eric Weinstein, top developer, and Mike Conway. Lead business development of battery energy storage division. So as the chair mentioned, I'll just go over some of the changes since we were here the last meeting. There were a few requests made to edit the layout. We take that back. We also have reviewed the comments from the reviewer. So the latest plan set that we submitted on January 5th, along with an updated stormwater report, kind of reflects all of those comments. I'll just kind of go through summary of changes. So this plan that we have here, and
Well, we've talked with, see it.
yeah, so this basically, well, this is a little bit different than what the commission's seen. This is kind of a presentation plan we put together just to highlight the areas that we've adjusted. So this green hatching, basically, That is area that in the original application, we were proposing to clear within buffer zones or clear. And in this revised layout, that is no longer being proposed. So we have reduced, we have taken a second look, kind of restricted or reduced the project footprint where possible and reduced the actual buffer zone impacts. So it nets out to be about an acre and a half reduction. May not sound big, that, you know, the project is obviously large, but that is purely buffer zone impact reduction. So pretty significant percentage of your actual buffer zone impact, and it's, you know, just a reminder, commission did a buffer zone only project, there was no actual wetland resource impact. So just kind of setting the table of what we're looking at here. The way we're able to reduce any of those, again, per the request of the commission, we have taken this road and the perimeter fence and moved that outside of the buffer. So in the original application, there were some areas where the road did encroach in the 100-foot buffer. We pulled that out. Same thing with the fence. There were areas where the fence did encroach within the 100-foot buffer. We pulled that out. So again, system's a bit smaller, but we're staying away from those buffer zone impacts. It's just great. This access road used to kind of, you know, straight, but we worked it around that. This is a bit outside the Conservation Commission's purview, but I think everyone, the planning board requested, and I think members of the commission probably interested in this area. We've increased the setback distance from the northwestern property to 150 feet. So it's a bit more vegetative screening, again, outside of the commission's purview, but that's part of the western membrane. Access, one of the items that was raised was access. We've improved access around the battery storage area. So this is partially requested by the planning board, but just to highlight some of the changes. So this is a ring road, to give fire department the emergency access, personnel, better access to the battery storage area. Again, this whole thing has been, it used to be stored down more towards this area. We shifted it north and a bit east to get outside of the buffer area. We've also added a few gates as requested for stormwater, maintenance access and in the event of,
we just point those out, where they are.
so we've added gates, basically, you know, near any stormwater facility. So we've got one here, one down here, we've got one here and one here. So really 5 additional gates, because we've also added another gate for the ring road. So 5 additional gates we've added.
Can I ask a question about the, you said you, increased the, or decreased the cutting of trees in the buffer zone. On your plans, it says 5 1/4, I think, is what you're, or 5 point something is what you're cutting. Is that reflected in this plan, that 1 1/4 acre, or is that new information?
This is, a sort of a part of that 5.5. So it's a piece of that is a bit more breaking it down. So the 5.5 acres that you're referencing, I believe, is the area that we are proposing to cut trees but not stump. So no earth disturbance, no ripping the stumps out or anything like that. That's basically any area outside of the fence. So that is, you know, effectively, it does overlap this area. So this is all proposed to be cut and stumps remain, or rather, I should say, actually, just to.
So you are cutting those. So the green.
No, sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm a little confused.
Yeah, no, and I just kind of misspoke. So the green is areas we're no longer touching at all.
Okay.
But the areas that you're referencing, the 5.5 acres, whatever, that's the area that is remaining. It can be cut, but not.
But leave, I say, but leave the stumps. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Now, can I just want to ask a question about the fence since we're clarifying. When you say the fence was moved outside the buffer zone, does that mean it's inside? Closer to the panel. Closer to the panels?
Yep,
Okay.
yeah, so the panel area reduced to allow that fence to be reduced, it's a little hard to see, I can.
That's okay,
show
I
you,
just
but
wanted to.
you know, for example, here's where the fence used to be, this kind of white, but right, it encroached in the buffer zone here, we pulled it way back to eliminate,
I see,
it was outside of that buffer zone.
okay,
Not within.
thank you.
Yep, and that's what that does, kind of more on the, as far as the ground treatment goes, is because it's outside the fence, we don't need to do that something, right? If it's outside the fence, if just cutting the trees, leaving this on, so by pulling the fence out, we reduce the impact of the buffer zone by, reducing the ground, ground disturbance.
Sure. Okay.
Stormwater design is updated, I can go through that if the commission would like more detail. Did get a response from Cohen Associates that all the revisions were acceptable, pretty much. I believe that their comments were reasonable, so we made all the recommended changes. I think, and the big piece with that was that, and then another item that we discussed a couple times was, and that the DEP recommended was that we have an on-site soil assessment done. And so since last time we were here, we're actually able to get a consultant, GZA Geoenvironmental out there. They analyzed the soil, did test pits for us and included that in the stormwater report that we used to basically verify our assumptions in the stormwater report. So that was a big one. And what that found was actually really positive for the project in that the test pits did not encounter any groundwater. Good, because, there's a minimum separation distance from basin bottom to groundwater table. So they went down to a depth of between 7 and 9 feet and to bedrock basically, and didn't find any groundwater or evidence of soil modeling. So that was really positive result for us.
Well, can I ask you a question about
Yeah.
that? Because it actually also says that they can't really tell for sure until the spring, that you'd have to retest.
I think that was from Government Associates basically being extra conservative, extra kind of belt and suspenders, right?
Well, that's what we need to be. So I'm curious about that because it says that it often has the groundwater table perched on that material in the spring. It's entirely possible it will be dry, but they say it raises a concern. So why wouldn't that be a concern for us?
It's something that I think we'd be amenable to a condition of checking that out in the spring.
Yes, but once we give you the permit, there's no guarantee of anything. So
Well,
I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with that because that's what the letter says. That's what the soil testing says. That you can't really tell if you're testing now because the soil will be different in the spring.
respectfully, I think if you read his email, he did mention something to the effect that.
I am reading the email. I have it right here in front of me.
Yep,
Would you like me to read it out loud?
sure.
Okay. It says the designer retained competent soil professionals to review on-site soils in the area of the proposed infiltration basin as is required by standards, thus sufficient to the commission for approval. Although no modeling was observed, we suggest confirmation in the spring since typically difficulty excavated glacial till, as described in the test pit logs, often has the groundwater table perched on that material in the spring. It is entirely possible that this till is dry in the spring, but its close horizontal proximity to a wetland with shallow groundwater raise a concern. The bottom of the test pits performed appeared to be above the wetland elevation, but we don't want the infiltration areas to be wet ponds annually in the spring.
So that kind of sentence there, if I may.
Sure.
I want to make sure I'm reading it correctly here. With no effect to the commission with regard to their ability to approve.
Well, that's their opinion.
So that's what he's saying basically is that the soil professional you thing was competent. They found no evidence of groundwater. that should be sufficient for the commission to approve. However, he's then going and saying, you know, might be worth checking to make sure, just double check to make sure, you know, there's nothing missed. Which I think is perfectly reasonable, but again, it's outside of, right, we've done all the reasonable checks that we can do at this time to make sure, and there's no evidence that we didn't own the groundwater, other than,
Can I?
yeah, sure.
So, is this approved and then you need to recheck, how far along in the project are you? At that point?
We,
And if it's rechecked and there's a problem,
we would, basically, we would do that prior to pulling the building. So we would do that
in the
prior to
spring,
construction, right, prior to building permit in the spring. Check, you know, if there's no groundwater observed, we'd submit that and say, we haven't made any changes, everything looks good. If we observed groundwater and for whatever reason felt that needed to change the design, we would have a building permit or potentially in conjunction with building permit, submit the revised changes or revised drawings for you and for the peer reviewer potentially to review.
and then in between, and then what would have been done? If it's approved now, between now and then,
No,
any work?
no work, the only work that, no actual grading or anything like that. The only work that potentially would be done at that time would maybe be some tree trimming. But no stormwater, you know, no modules, no fencing, no roads, nothing.
Do you feel there's room, if groundwater was discovered, that there's room to move that design
Yeah.
to be an effective basin
Yeah.
system?
Yeah, I think that's, again, what I was mentioning, I think it's really positive, the report, because maybe there's some groundwater perched on that bedrock, but that bedrock is 7 feet down. So we have 7 feet to work with. You know, you want to be able to have 4 feet, let's say. But it gives an indication that we have enough to work with. If we did need to bring it up a bit, you know, make it a little bit bigger. So it's definitely there would be a, you know, an engineering solution.
Well, the later.
I think that's, let's make sure, I think that was kind of the main, updates. This is a high level on the stormwater changes. We did, again, this is partially, at suggestion of the planning board, we did, ensure that the battery storage area is kind of isolated. There are some swales, it's on the grading plan, direct water coming overland around that area to the basin before discharge to the wetland, so. That was an improvement there, and that was, again, by the peer reviewer. So-
Can I just look at this letter again? So, I just couldn't tell on the plans, it says that, they suggest, to change the shape and position to basins 2 and 3. Was that done on these plans or is that yet to be done?
That would be yet to be done. I think that's, again, sort of in the vein of like, you might want to look at this again, but that's the basin here.
Which gets, well, it's down there and then the 3 is up to the right.
Yep. Yep.
So. And, the outlet pipe and weir of basin 2, changing all that. So how would we be confident that those changes would be?
Because again, if you condition approval, right, if you place a condition of the approval, we would have to adhere to it. We would again submit revised plans with the building permit or has the building permit. And the commission would have the chance at that time to say, yes, they did what we asked them to do. Building inspector, you know, give them a building permit, or no, they haven't met our conditions, do not issue a building permit. So that's, for these sort of, you know, I don't want to use the word minor, but things that the peer reviewers indicated could be approved as a condition. That's what we propose, you know, we'd be amenable to a condition, addressing.
Reference, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So, yeah, I think that's all I have. You know, again, I guess in closing, I feel like we feel pretty good about the changes we've made. We're encouraging the commission from the community that want to minimize impact, so. We reduce impact where possible, mitigate it with the stormwater, right, kind of the purpose of the stormwater. Mitigate any discharges coming from or impacts from the project to those wetlands. Gone through that here with the stormwater, so we feel we've addressed those items, we would like, we think that this is a project that the commission should vote to approve. We appreciate it.
The replan for the end, do you know, have you worked about that, the pollinator mix? Who does that?
Yeah, so the actual seed mix is specified
Right,
on
I
there.
saw that, yeah.
Yep, and that's Ernst, the company, that's the one, yeah. Yep. Ernst, so that would be applied by well, basically the contractor hired by the engineering procurement, company, construction company, if that does the work. So they apply it, they typically have some guarantee, adherence, perhaps it actually take. But again, as part of order conditions, a couple of those things that come with that as far as the commission's involved is prior to construction, we would notify the commission, be able to come out, walk the site, make sure our erosion controls are set up. And then also at the end, we would apply for a certificate of completion, which in order for you to issue that to the project, we would need to demonstrate that our vegetation is. So that's kind of a check balance there and make sure.
And once it's seeded, we then put something down and hold it until it's germinated?
If necessary, a certain like steep slope, yes, sometimes it'll be like a tackifier applied or straw. It may, that's kind of like a construction means or method, so we typically will leave to the contractor to make sure that they're doing what they need to do in certain areas, but it's common, yeah.
But it's not just common, it's in the plans that it has to be done. Am I wrong about that?
Well, the seeding, yes, but not
It does say,
necessarily.
great, no, it says cover. I read these plans, and it does say cover, doesn't it? Am I wrong
I'm
about
sure
that?
what you mean by cover.
It says you have to put something to hold the seeds down and the soil. And it also says you have to water, so wouldn't that mean that that's something that has to happen?
If needed, yes.
Well, but who waters it?
We can make that a condition. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think it says it in the plans, that's why I'm asking, because it says that it would be applied.
And I'd have to, I'm not sure what area you're referencing, but
I can find it for you.
yeah,
And where would you get the water,
that's typically brought off site, right, cockpit.
Right. That's what I figured.
You can make that seating and cover and.
Well, it's confusing to me only because it specifies it in these plans, and if we're not. If what's specified in the plans and what's happening, then there seems to be a disconnect.
What's on the plan will see what happening, I think maybe I'm just misunderstanding what your, want to make sure we're looking at things.
Either one with slope conditions, or 3-to-1 slope.
Right, and that's what I'm wondering, if that would be correct, right there. I agree on slope, a certain slope would be required to go like slide down, so.
But if it's,
That might be,
maybe that's
and
right.
that is, would be required, wouldn't take out of that.
Okay.
So certain situations would take required.
Okay. And in that putting down of seed, have you guys thought about the wind in this area? Which is pretty severe sometimes.
Again, it's kind of a form of means and methods, construction means and methods. I think, have not specifically addressed that, during hydro seeding, I think they would be able to. You're not doing during days when the wind is outside of.
Well, I'm just thinking of like of the day my puzzle got blown off my table because somebody used a vacuum cleaner. And I would think the seeds, it might be a similar experience. So I think for us, that might need to be a condition because we get a lot of wind.
We can make that a condition.
Yeah.
And typically these hydrants use, you know, a little bit less of water in it, so it holds it down a bit more than just like dry season.
Then
But yeah, we'd be happy to, you know, condition ensuring that, you know, we factor.
And one possible way of addressing that is, seed it first and then put down the erosion control programs, right? And, I think we would definitely put that. Does anyone else have any questions or comments?
I still have something.
No, we're not. Pardon me. I want to make a comment.
Thank you.
I get some comments. I think in your original, you mentioned, 5-acre phases. And then in your most recent, less than 0.5%. Will you be more specific about how it's going to be segmented?
Yes, and that's, based on the planning board approval, so we're trying to be consistent with what the planning board approved, so. If, you know, the size of the site made more sense for it to be 25%, and that was the planning board approval, so that's. Already. About 5 acres.
Yeah. Well, 25% of 30 acres, still more than that.
Yeah, although we're not at 30 acres anymore, we're.
Yeah, that's what I was. Anyway, it's nice to know what exact. And then, I think, there's a couple of other things. Yeah, yay report. That has been, well, they actually included an inspection form or law, which was very helpful. That's sort of a pretty fun.
Yeah, just a little bit back, that is an additional kind of level of protection, if you will, to the environment that happens in projects that will need to obtain coverage, but under the EPA for, stormwater discharge and construction activity. So as part of that, we need to put together a stormwater pollution prevention plan, SWIP, that has a lot of material on erosion control requirements and also logs, that sort of thing. So I think there's maybe a couple things that would be for inspecting the actual erosion controls, logging those inspections, but then also we did include an O&M plan. There'll be maintenance, right, for the more long-term during operation, maintenance inspection of the, flood soil.
Yeah, I understand that. I think I mentioned there somewhere about inspections of the system after a certain rainfall, so forth. That's very important. But this will be in our conditions too.
So is that not the codes for those inspections?
Well, that's
When they happen?
depends. I mean, you could hire someone to do it, or you could.
But can we be included?
Yeah, we actually already have a condition from the planning board to apply those, and so I think that.
Yeah.
You. To the town there.
And I was looking at the plans here, and that, our plan, which map it was, but it should, there's a diagram of, access fence that has the 6-inch clearance underneath. I take it that would be for the whole perimeter fence there.
Yeah, that's wildlife gap, kind of like our standard. It allows at least smaller animals to traverse through the site, you know, it will be like a sort of net of cover type, so pretty good habitat for a lot of the smaller animals. That'd be the entire fence and gate.
The other thing is, C 5.1, I assume that's fairly generic, the mentions a compost mulch food, which we call straw wattle. But you're not actually gonna be using those, right?
They, there may be scenarios, areas where, I don't wanna say no, because the contractor may want to use those in areas, but we will be emphasizing the use of, wood strand burns.
Yeah, I saw that, that's,
Yeah.
those lines are firm.
Yeah, I think they are really, really great. We're gonna have material on site from stumps. They're really great, they can be left in place permanently.
What is it?
It's basically like the stump grindings, right, so like wood chips,
When they compress it?
and not compressed, they just basically put it, you can put it out in like a berm, so it's like a pile a couple feet high. That runs the length of, you know, kind of like runs the contour, so any rainwater coming down gets filtered, any sediment that's in the rainwater.
Gradually.
Exactly, biodegrades over time and that.
And then what's left?
And just kind of like a little hill.
And then.
Right.
No, I'm serious. Mushrooms, let's go after. No, so.
But we'll just get in there.
But so then what would filter water coming through, or is it not necessary at that point?
If at that point, it would be for this for kind of like for construction, they'd be acting during construction, but then later, by that time. The actual seed should be fully established across the site, and there shouldn't be any sediment of them actually traveling, so it would be. Okay.
All right, going back to GCA, your consultant. And, they mentioned there were test wells out there, I didn't see anything on the map about test wells. Or is that kind of like a, boilerplate kind of on there?
I think that's more of like a boilerplate.
Yeah.
That's not, they're probably referring to test kits.
And we got the groundwater, and
Yeah.
that. Soil kind of frozen.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it went 7 to 9 feet down, so by this, down there, wasn't necessarily perfect, but yeah, that's what they're referring to. There wasn't additional wells or anything, so.
Okay, that's what I thought. In their report, GZA also mentioned so-called geotechnical limitations in the analysis, which was also pointed out by our consultants. The fact that the test pit really isn't representative of the whole site, and then it's not a proper sort of test, which has to be done with a hand auger as you go out. And that's something of concern for me, and I suppose the others, because we won't have that data. And as you mentioned, we could make it a condition. But we'll think about that for now.
And just to point out, I guess, you know, for the wetland delineation, right, that was much more extensive across the site than it, you know, has.
I realize now, I have to do a lot of those.
Right.
Yeah, well, the other thing is, when we went out and did our site visit in the fall, I think we saw the wetland that's off to the east. And a lot of the markers were either not visible or disintegrated. So one of the things we want to see now is have that redelineated, not necessarily redelineated, but you have all the coordinates. You can just go out there and get someone to mark where all the edge of the buffer zone and where the wetlands are, so that when people start working in there, they're aware of it. Because loggers don't always pay attention to where they're supposed to be.
Yes, we could definitely do that as for the condition, or make sure you can check it during your pre-construction site walk, but we could definitely do that to make sure that no one is inadvertently working in a wetland. And we also put up a perimeter erosion controls, which kind of acts as like a, you know, limit of work as well, but understood, we definitely want to make sure it's clear so that there's no access or perimeter.
I think we have to be extra cautious, because if we were fighting the project, I feel more confident that we do the right thing, but we don't know who we're going to get, and we don't know what the reputation is, and we're going to have to be so that conditions attached.
I'll let you know. Yep, I think the planning board did a similar thing, right, they did, put it all in writing, and that makes sense, where we understand the landlord for that, we'll do what we can to pass any information along to make sure everything's done, way that's being discussed.
Yeah, we would like to, I think they also required that, as soon as possible, be given the contact information so that we can communicate with these new people.
So you don't know who that is yet?
Well, that, more than likely it's gonna be us. That's something that's kind of new and I don't think you.
No, they have this plan.
Yeah, over the last number of months, we've actually been considering owning, and operating our own, our own facilities. I don't wanna give you the impression that it's 100% that that's going to happen. Our business model remains and is to develop a project and we sell to a long-term owner and operator. In this case, this is one of the projects we are expecting to own ourselves. So more than likely that's will be a contractor or a version of us. I don't know if it's going to be a contractor or contractors. But like you said, the conditions of approval apply to the project. So whether it's us or someone else, it's the project. But maybe helpful to understand just for your.
That's clear, that's great information.
That would be great.
Eric, where is this true? Where else is this true? That newly operates a best system?
Yeah, so we've historically been specifically a developer only. We're now considering vertical integration where we would basically be a developer. Instead of selling to a long-term asset owner and operator, we would do that as well. So this is a new portfolio of projects that we're considering to do that for.
The first. Thank you.
So I think we'll open it up to.
Well, can I ask one more question? Could you just do me a favor, just so I really understand step by step? What happens first, what happens second? You know, once you get the approval, and my understanding is maybe you can't do anything until the nesting bats leave or something. But, can you walk me through just like, does the fence go up?
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing.
General.
Yeah.
Construction phases,
Yeah.
If I can just add to it, yeah, the planning board, approval and conditions in there also specify, I'm sure, but I think that's laid out very clearly how that should be fixed.
Yeah, so there'll be an element of phasing as far as portions of this site, but I guess on like a bit of a higher level as far as like the order of operations, looking for it all done first. As you mentioned, right, tree clearing would be item number one. There is, we actually are hoping to get things moving so that we can have the trees cut prior to March 31st, because that's when the bats come up. Because right now the bats are hibernating. We don't want them roosting in a tree, because then you don't want to cut it down when they're in there. So they are hibernating until March 31st. So we would like to put the trees by then.
You're aware of the weather in this area, right? Sorry, just as it's relative.
Yes.
Yeah.
They roost those, the northern long-eared bat, specifically, and they, hibernate in hibernacula, which are basically caves. It's actually only kind of interesting, learned a lot about them. There's only a handful in the state, and they're like, he's very protective of like the exact location of those, but yes.
So it's a secret where they are?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure well, I'm sure you find out, but, they are more specific, caves, not in our area, not, at least on the project area. But the concern is,
They come back.
they come out and they find basically dead trees with peeling bark, and they'll get in there and have their babies. And we don't want to cutting trees down that have baby bats. So we need to cut the trees before March 31st. So that'd be stage
Do
one.
you think that's realistic?
Yeah, we can mobilize and
I
get
mean,
up there.
With
It's,
the weather, with permits, it just seems
we're
a little bit like a pipe dream, but good luck.
Well, we're hoping to are done permitting very soon. And yeah, so anyways, that would be stage one. Again, now that would only be cutting the trees, right? Once they're on the ground back, right? want to share. So at some point following that, we pull a building permit to actually get, construction going in earnest. It would be tree stumping would be the first, right? Civil work typically is tree stumping. Any access roads would be cut in there. And again, there's kind of seeding going on concurrently here that may not, so they're not going to be trampled. Put modules in. After that, it's typically in parallel, kind of the racking foundations, so the foundation will have like a tracked machine going and put the foundations in the actual array area themselves. Typically, concurrently with that, we'll be placing conduit and concrete pads for the electrical equipment. At the same time on the civil front, typically they're working on stormwater features. And then the fencing is one of the last pieces to go in, because that kind of constricts some of the movement. But then following that, it's more of the electrical. So all the wiring needs to be done right. That's where the engineer is the Board of Health meeting, right? The actual active construction is a few months maybe. But there's a long time that's construction, but it's electricians running wiring and, big electrical trenches and also putting up utility poles. And, that's kind of one of the last things, right? There's a lot of commissioning that happens when everything's perfect. What was next?
And when you had some of those conduits will be buried, how deep could they be buried?
Yep, they're everything outside of. So they're overhead to this point, so we're kind of we pulled it in from the road to reduce the visibility, but there's series of poles here, and from here and everything east, all underground, and I think the cover requirement is at least 24 inches of, that's the cover, and then the bottom rate of 36.
And decommissioning will be pulled out, right, too.
The wires will go out, the actual conduits themselves are typically at the end of the foot.
And those are the ones that carry the wire.
Yeah, like a PVC conduit, yeah, that's the only thing kind of left in place, so like concrete pads that we remove, anything, that's coming out from the surface of. PVC is like 3 feet down.
But they pull the wire too?
The wires will pull out there.
Okay. Yeah, but then it's easy.
Brandon, does each fence post have its own concrete?
No, the fence posts, so we're proposing, it's not a chain link fence, it's like an ag fence. Which is woven wire stuff, yeah, there's a bunch of different names, right, so it's a wooden post. And not every single one is placed in concrete, they're sort of. Rather, the corner posts we have require concrete.
But it's metal fence.
No, they're wooden posts with like a woven wire actual fabric.
Some form of pressure treated?
Yeah, I'm actually not sure exactly, if it's a blood sugar or, it's pressure treated or something that stays or that.
So chemicals will present.
Yeah, as a typical, I can definitely double check that, but, yeah, like a utility pole, right? Yeah.
Right, so, yeah, chemicals are present. So is there a way for us to specify that it's so that we don't have to deal with any bleaching? I mean, they tell you not to walk barefoot on your deck, put down pressure treated. I'm just curious.
I'm not sure what's commercially viable or available, as Eric mentioned, I think, right, we're talking more of like the utility pole, right? We have utility pole all over the place, so you can see sort of
I don't have any control over that, so I'm not asking about this. Why did you go with wood versus a metal fence post? I'm just curious, you know.
Aesthetics, most people like,
Sure.
look,
That
yeah,
makes sense.
better than a chain link fence.
Just know of an example in southeastern Mass recently where a solar array was put in on telephone poles, folks. And then they, lo and behold, discovered that that leaks, so they pulled them all out, and put it out.
That's a pretty unique project, I know what you're talking about, that's in a very rare product.
Yes,
Oh, wow.
but we don't provide groundwater to 3 different systems up here. With concern.
And we drink it,
Out here.
not in this building, because it's been leached and we can't drink the tap water, but in all of our wells, I want to make sure I can drink it.
No, we're satisfied, I'd like to open it up to questions, audience, and again, as I said, it's try to keep it like this. Raise your hand if you want to speak and take a turn. Okay.
I'm very concerned about GZA's soils report. I didn't see any qualifications for the person who did that report. But they talk in terms of it being a sandy road. The trace amounts of silt. Now, the soils on that site are mapped by the Soil Conservation Service or after that, the Natural Resources Conservation Service as Marlow and Peru loans. I've been farming those 2 soils for 40 years. My soils, which are granted probably a mile from here as the crow flies, almost half of those soils are silt. They found trace amounts. Doesn't give me much confidence in the person who did those tests. Also, I looked at the photographs of the test pits. There isn't a soil scientist in their right mind that would jump down a 7-foot to 9-foot hole in the ground looking for signs of soil and signs of water regimes, fluctuating water regime. Those were just little tiny holes. That was not a very good soil test, and maybe because they did it in December, that's what they get away with. But it's not what needs to be done to really know what's in there. First of all, these basins don't really, the criteria for basins don't really talk in terms of groundwater. We talk in terms of the fluctuating groundwater. And that's why models, concretions, oxidized rhizospheres, things like that are used to indicate that. I can't believe they didn't find anything. Now, I saw the piles of soil that were removed from those holes. You couldn't find anything. And that soil to me, now I'm just looking at a photograph, looks very, very silty to me. It didn't look like beach sand. According to them, they have fine beach sand in there. And trace amounts of silt. That's not, I would bet, I know those soils intimately after 40 years of farming. There's something wrong there. There's something not right. There's something that wasn't analyzed properly by somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience in soil science. I'm a wetland scientist, I'm not a soil scientist, but I do a lot of hydric soils, or have in the past. I'm retired now. But I wouldn't bet any money or anything on what took place out there. What I saw as far as the data that was submitted and the photographs that were also submitted. So, I don't know, but we gotta take a harder look at all of this with somebody who's a lot more qualified than that person that GZA sent out. Also, just went through the sequences that Betsy asked, the sequences of this project. Typically, any project like this that is phased, the applicant issues a phasing plan. You know exactly what's going to happen when, in what areas. Because if they're gonna do 5 acres or 25%, whatever, at a time, in that area, there's gonna be a whole series of different events, construction events that take place. It's not gonna happen the way you just mentioned. You know, you're not gonna go in there and do that, because that's not gonna be on the 5 acres that you're working on now. So, in projects like this, there's a phasing plan that gets submitted to the commission prior to any order of conditions, prior to closing any, hearings on this particular project. It really needs to be, looked at from a real tactical point of view, what's gonna happen when. And as you were saying, March, my son was a commercial logger for many years. Typically in this area, and he lives in Savoy, the next town over. Typically in this area, loggers are out of the woods in March. The reason being is one thing we have in March is a very transitional month. Sometimes it's very wintry, sometimes it's very spring-like. But one thing we always have in March is mud. And mud enhances erosion. And erosion is a huge problem on this site because of the location of the project and the wetlands associated with it. Those detention basins, they're gonna function. I think they're the most important structures on this project as far as controlling sedimentation of the wetland. And they're supposedly gonna function as sediment traps. The problem is I don't see how they're designed to capture sediment. And could you explain to me the diagram of the detention? Did you bring the diagrams with you today?
I don't have them with you.
Well,
I have them. I have a copy.
Can you explain that, the diagram, the detail on, I think it's, E5.1, how that actual diagram is gonna extract sediments? And I'm telling you, there's not trace sediments on that project.
Don't read all my notes. No, I'm kidding.
On those points, I would mention, right, the soil analysis, you know, we actually gave you that work, it was also reviewed by Gunlow and Associates. So, it's, so it was reviewed, they didn't raise any concerns there. Also, I'll also mention that, you know, prior to construction, additional subsurface investigation will be done for example, foundation, screws, there'll be pull tests, that type of thing. Prior, again, as we ramp up and get closer to construction, so there will be more, you know, analysis or work done in that area. But again, I guess the main thing to bring up is that it was reviewed by that peer reviewer, they didn't change any of those things. So are you referring to this one, temporary sediment trap?
What is that? I
It's,
don't even know what that is.
this is a detail that basically, specifying the outlet structure for any temporary sediment trap. So specifying the aggregate, that will be used, so the sediment trap will be using it for kind of like a rock, check dam type outlet consisting of a larger, right, E50 of 9-inch minimum stone, faced with a smaller stone to allow some filtration through that. So this is pulled from DEP stormwater handbook. Effectively create a pool, again, with that kind of rock check dam outlet construction.
Now, the detention basins were, looked at with front load, and they probably looked at them from the perspective of the detention basin. But they are going to be critical structures in this particular. Now, this is a site with erosive soil on a slope that all drains down into a wetland. It's a recipe for a catastrophe. And if a catastrophe happens, and I've seen this, and an enforcement order is issued, that project could sit around for a year before it's picks up and starts to construct again. And so if it's not done properly in the beginning, it can be probably a mess. The detention basin that you have in there, are you going to add anything to that to trap sediment?
I'm not sure what you're referring to, what you would add.
The diagram of the detention basin, what number is that, 8? Of the detention basin, not the trap.
No, the detention basin is 2.
Yeah, that one, that's what what you got, 4 of them? That's what they're supposed to look like when they're done. But what are they gonna look like when they're sediment trapped?
So again, this is not the construction plan set. So some of the questions that you're raising are construction level, done by our EPC contractor prior to constructing the project.
The commission has to see what these traps are gonna look like, because if not, and the sediment goes in there and comes right out, it's going to go right into a wetland and fill that wetland. And they're gonna be responsible for enforcing all of this, which is a huge headache for everybody involved.
Right, and the project has a huge incentive to not let that happen. As you mentioned, that's completely correct. It can take years if there's some sort of enforcement order. So there's a huge incentive for us, for the project, to make sure that absolutely does not happen, and that we make sure that, construction means and methods are followed to eliminate the chance of wetland being impacted, because no one wants that to happen. So, our goals are aligned with that.
So can you get us a plan, a construction plan, so that we know that we're approving a permit that is actually gonna be taken care of? Because once we approve it, and
their condition.
Yeah,
can we get a plan?
we'd be happy to provide it ahead of building permit, again, as a condition of approval. Just because we can't develop a construction level plan set without even a project that's approved. But right, we can't develop or spend a piece of project that may not be allowed to happen. But once that is approved, we'd be happy to provide our solution.
So I'd like to allow someone else, anybody else, I guess that's anyone else with a question.
Yes, could you just clarify, has the location of the battery storage changed at all? The map looks very different to me, but I might just keep imagining this.
It's just the structure.
It's okay, thank you. And
It's slightly shifted northeast to get away from the west.
okay. And then, in terms of the cutting, are you talking this March 31st? I want to make sure I'm understanding this. So can you tell me, the original plans said this wasn't to start until the end of 2026, or late 2026, I believe what it was. Can you tell me when and why that has changed?
Really the main factor is the northern long-eared bat that we mentioned, because if we don't get those trees cut prior to March 31st, we have to wait till November 1st, sorry. So
Okay,
it's just that gap. We
Okay.
want to be able to do some work prior to November.
So I just need to share, this puts me in a pretty terrible position because my pasture is now ice. So you'll come in here and start clear cutting and I may have horses running around on ice, and this is a recipe for broken legs. Had there been some warning, I could have planned for this a little bit, but wanted to share that. Also wanted to note that I know the, shoot. I know no one has required a parking plan, and I don't know if you were on premises during the soil testing, but seeing as you may be the running this project, I need to share parking was already an issue. Someone blocked my driveway for a while, and someone parked so close to my driveway that I cannot make that turn if I have a horse trailer with me. So I greatly appreciate it if there could be a designation to stop the parking at the property line, basically, for whatever work occurs next. Thanks.
Yes, understood. Yeah, that, you make sure that we're working.
Thanks.
And insofar as, it's helpful, we can chat to you about a time for a.
That would be probably too late, but that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're talking about your horses and ice,
Mhm.
and then cutting, what's the connection?
Yeah, so this will be frightening. This is not something they've ever seen.
I see.
And if they had started in November before there was ice all over the ground, as I assumed they were starting November 2026, there's some adjustment period that should not would get used to it.
Psychological disturbance for them.
Yes, and they will run and they will panic, whereas otherwise in the winter, they're pretty careful. They know there's ice. So that all goes out the window when they're scared.
Are there any other new questions there?
A little unrelated to the conservation, but what's your proposed kilowatt hour generation per acre on this project?
Let's see, 5 megawatts per acre.
You speak up.
So, yeah, I'm just trying to do the math. So there is that.
Hopefully no rocket science.
Somewhere between like 3.5. What's that? Maybe I misunderstood the question. Can you repeat it?
Simple question, kilowatt hour generation per acre.
Kilowatt hour, okay. Are you referring to system size or how much production?
Production of kilowatt hours per acre. Not a complicated question. You can't just come, you don't know what you come up with acre per acre kilowatt hour generation.
Talk through it. So about, you put about 5 acres, 5 megawatts of, no, 1 megawatt of solar per 5 acres.
Oh, so we have to do some division here. So give me the, how many megawatts?
Approximately 7 or so.
7 megawatts per 5 acres.
So, there's 7 megawatts overall. So just.
Wait, I'm getting a little, too much information that's not.
That's why, there's a calculator.
All right, so for the 23 acres of panels, do we have 23 acres?
We're more like 17 now.
Oh, okay, that's interesting, 17 acres. So 17 acres, and what's the total kilowatt hour generation?
You want this per acre, right?
Oh, God almighty.
All right, so
I'll take it however you give it to me.
5 megawatts per acre, so like 1 acre per 5 megawatts, so about 1.25 megawatts per acre. And then you've got each kilowatt produces like, this is like 1250, you're approximately most of 1,250 kilowatt per kilowatt over the entire year. So take 1.25 times 1250, you get the number in megawatt hours.
All right, so I can just jot that down now that you got it worked out. So do we have it worked out per acre? No, kilowatt hours per acre or no? That's good.
1560 megawatt hours of which we have to go.
Well, then you get the extra comment in there, so you have to megawatt hours.
Yeah,
One more time per acre.
1560
1560 megawatts.
megawatt hours.
I think
Anyone else? Okay.
Now, can we go on to something else? Anyone?
I just wanted to get the answer, that's all.
Ed, do you have anything further you'd like to say?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
The detention basins, so we're not gonna worry about sediment traps in these detention basins. Right, that the applicant is very resistant to actually designing a basin that's actually going to trap sediment. And I think this particular site, those are the most critical structures as far as venting sedimentation of the surrounding wetlands. I just want to go on record with that. These detention basins, discharge into a plunge pool. The plunge pool is on the edge of the buffer zone. Will the water that's discharged from the plunge pool get to the wetland?
Eventually, yes, it's downhill.
Will they scour anything in the buffer zone to get there?
The purpose of the plunge pool is to prevent that, so no. Obviously,
Plunge pool don't prevent that. Plunge pool is just a pool that slows the water down a little bit, but then goes down into a sloped area, which is the buffer zone.
right, it slows the water down, spreads it out.
Now,
So
there's not,
the downhill gradient should be
the way that's
stabilized.
designed is not spreading it out, it's not a
Not a
spread.
level spreader, no, it's not creating, putting back in a sheet, it is dissipating some of that energy. Obviously, you can't guarantee anything, but the purpose is to reduce that amount of energy that's discharging to avoid or minimize the chance of that scouring. And the other piece of it is the stabilization of the slopes downhill, which should be stabilized. Again, we've talked about seeding, making sure that seed takes well and stabilize that downhill. And then the last piece of it is they're all outside the fence, which again is the area where we're not stumping. So that helps all those roots, that topsoil, all of that vegetation that we're not taking out is still gonna be in there. Kind of retain and hold that soil, with scouring. Outside the fence, again, inside the fence, we do have to stump, but outside the fence, it's gonna be a bit more robust.
I've seen what happens when waters log an area. It doesn't matter if you stump it or not, there's still gonna be a lot of exposed soil there. It's the job of the commissions to protect those wetlands. And it sounds like, this particular project, if you're dumping water, water that just comes in a detention basin and has a 12-inch pipe that just runs right out. It's hardly gonna get retained, depending on if it's a huge storm, maybe it will retain something. But mostly, those basins are gonna be pretty dry most of the time because the water's gonna flow in, flow right out in those huge pipes, and go into some plunge pool, which is relatively small for the size of that pipe, and then go from there into the wetland and transport sediment from the buffer zone into that wetland. That's not what the Wetlands Protection Act wants an applicant to do. They want the applicant to design things that protects the wetland, not put sediment, not producing sediment in that wetland.
Again, it's been reviewed by the third party peer reviewer, found that the stormwater design meets their standards.
You know, I worked with Gunville for many years. I can tell you a lot of history. I'll give Charlie a call and find out exactly what they did. I doubt they looked at it from that perspective. Unless somebody specifically asked them to look for it. All I understand is they were looking at the stormwater report. This is not part of the stormwater report. These are structures that are designed to manage stormwater without sedimentation of actually wetlands. It taught me something when I looked at these soil, but I never saw a trapezoidal weir associated with a detention basin. What is a trapezoidal weir. I know what they are in rivers and streams and measure water flow, coming out of a dam or something, but that's moving water. What is a trapezoidal, weir doing on a retention basin?
Basically what that allows is for the outlet of that basin to be customized to the storms that we're encountering, right? So as I mentioned before in other meetings, the purpose of stormwater structures are to mimic the pre-existing discharge from the site. So by having that weir, and trapezoidal, it can be trapezoidal, it can be rectangular, but effectively what it is you can have a concrete section that can be cut out in different widths at different elevations, so that, you know, for a smaller storm, maybe you have, actually the one that we are proposing is sort of, I know it's waving my arm, but it's got a smaller section, or at the lower elevations. So what that means is smaller storm, right, the outlets may be a, 1 foot gap weir that it discharges. But then for the 100-year storm, you don't want to be holding back too much water. And so if as the water rises up in the basin, it starts discharging over the wider weir. So that's all it is. It's a way of, kind of customizing the discharge.
When the basin fills up, it'll go out through that emergency spillway.
Yep.
You're calling it, like, clear.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I guess that would work.
That's right. Good. So I'll just say that the term trapezoidal weir is sort of from the software. We actually design the design and the proposed design is actually just a rectangular shape. It's not actually, we could do trapezoid, but we didn't find that.
And can you describe the custom sharp crested weir on an infiltration basin?
Yep, that's really the same thing. That's kind of what I was referring to. It functions the same way. So again, it'll be like a precast concrete section that's embedded in the embankment, or like the embankment of the berm will come to each side. And then there'll be notches in that concrete section to allow the water to discharge at the rate that we want to mimic the.
Does that have a French pool associated with it?
Yeah, like a riprap apron.
Does anyone else have questions?
I'd like to go back to the staging if I may. So we're somewhere between 5 and 6 acres at a time. Are those going to be contiguous? We know.
I would imagine yes. Again, that's something that you would want to, I don't want to be false guaranteed basically. So to EPC contractor, need to make sure that they can make that work. But I would imagine it is, they'll be.
That said, it's also more efficient probably to cut for 20 or 32 acres at once.
Right.
So that's not staged, the tree clearing.
The tree cuttings, right, the tree cutting we would propose, because it has no earth disturbance, to not phase. But when it comes to earth disturbing activities, the dumping the road, all that would phase, to make sure that those areas are stabilized before moving on.
Don't you need roads? Don't the loggers need roads?
Yeah.
It does disturb the soil. We've done it on our property. Yeah, it absolutely does.
Right, but it's much less, concern like that, pulling up a stump and.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Let's make it 5 minutes, okay?
Okay. Eric, that's exactly why, a phasing plan is needed, because you don't know what's gonna get phased, when and where, and what, you just don't know. And they can say, well, this is phasing, this is phasing, this is phasing. So, at any rate, concerned about shade being removed from wetlands. Can we take a look at the shading, and,
And you might think,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't bring it out. No, you can have it.
don't we have one?
Yeah.
if you wanna put it up for the commission to see,
We have our own.
you have your own.
It's like page 3. I think you've gone too far. Hey,
What, no, by the number.
C31.
Right.
Thank you. Bring it. Where are we?
You wanna take it off there, you can.
Question.
All the shading that takes place, I think that's wetland A on the eastern side, that's the eastern side where your hand is down. Okay. Are those trees being removed?
No.
Is shade being removed from it?
No, the shade that is shown, these kind of shapes are what will remain. That shade that will remain, so that
There's a
represents,
shade that remains.
yes, that represents like the edge. You know, obviously, everything inside will also be shaded, but we just showed the kind of edge tree shape.
How about the rest of the diagrams in there? They're not shading any panels at all?
No, that's kind of, part of why we do this analysis. Is, the logical shape.
Right. Okay. Speaking, the shade that's there now for the wetlands will be there when the project's built.
So, I just got a couple, including, in view of, the reports we got from our consultants and, from XGCA regarding the limitations of the soil testing. Could make this issue. But I would feel much more comfortable that was done before anything is done. And so I'm not in favor of closing the mirrors out because I want to have that information for us when we do the the permit. I'm wondering how you all.
I agree.
That information also.
To be clear, what information are you? Well, we would like to have a real soil survey done, not just a test pit. Before anything is done.
I'm not clear on what that.
That means
What
what
we
we
can disclose in it.
So a soil scientist goes out there on the ground, gets how his auger, takes samples, not just you're the wetland, but to go out so that we can verify that all these calculations are going to be effective in designing proposals. So I'm not suggesting we continue this period until we have that information. And are you saying like you're in favor of that or not?
I'm in favor.
Yeah, you just asked for a little more clarity on that. Are you, just to go back, because I can make sure we have. So we did a soil list analysis in GTA. And the reason way that you initially started describing that sounds like, so we established that the most test is done, their recommendation is that it could be a condition from you that at a future date. So I think the way that you started, put in my head, you wanted to, you wanted to have, before. Project. Is that actually what you're referring to? Yes. Okay, understood. So just to clarify, Randy, can jump in. But. So the soil testing was completed. That's good, the peer review said it's good, but it's saying, get more development expenses. We go back out in the spring and check it out again. As a condition. We would not be able to build the project before that was actually done, if you so chose to include that as a condition. So what you're describing is accomplished by approval of the condition that must be accomplished before the building breaks.
Well, see, now that's the catch. Once we get to the, permit and make it a condition, there's no guarantee it's gonna happen where we want it to happen. The only way I can see this is we have that data before we give you any kind of a permit.
Why, sorry,
I'm just saying that this is my belief anyway. I think we need to have this not as a condition. We have less leverage if we make it a condition. I want to see it up front before we even start.
if I may. If it's explicitly in as a condition of what must be done. Why do you believe that it would not be done to that standard? Like that's what would be required of us as a project.
Okay, I'll explain this again. This is a big project. We've never done anything like this. Soils are erosive, as Mr. Buckner has pointed out, and we just have to be very cautious of this. This is just taking an extra precaution. It would mean a delay in your project, but it won't kill your profit or anything like that, because you're going to be building the same project, but it's going to be done more carefully.
I'm not clear on what information you're looking for, and I guess the other item here is obviously we're looking at, snowpack for a month, so this is. Right, we can't do what you're describing until.
That's right.
Spring.
That's true.
And that's the gray area that was specified in this email.
Right, and that's what,
Spring conditions are gonna be different than anything we've looked at yet.
Right, but what you're describing is different than what the peer reviewer was mentioning. They were mentioning identifying potential groundwater, not augering soil samples throughout the site. So I just wanna, I'm not clear on what that would tell us. Because the test pit is much more thorough, right? It tells us the whole subsurface conditions, rather than just kind of like the top.
At one site, which is on the edge of the project, it's not representative of the whole landscape. And that's what I object to. I mean, I could have maybe Mr. Stockton could explain what a soil survey is. Would you do that?
Well, I certainly can, I have a long history with the soil survey in this town, because when I moved here 42 years ago, this town was not surveyed. And I actually requested that it get surveyed. The smallest area that they survey is 5 acres. So there could be a variety of things that happen in there. And I think GZA used the National Resources Conservation Service information to explain that. But these are very erosive soil. This whole project is surrounded by wetlands, jurisdictional wetlands, and it's got slope, and it's got erosive soils, and it's got wetlands. It's not an easy project. I mean, I don't know where you guys are used to building things, but these hills are quite different than East and Far State. And this is not an easy project. It's not a simple one, and the commission wants to have a lot of data before they make their determination and come up with a order condition.
I can appreciate that, but I guess I'm still not clear on what would this data potentially change?
how you approach the
Design.
wetlands.
Yeah, the design.
One part of the design, but.
The soil runoff, the water runoff.
But that's a. So basically what you're getting at is the hydrological soil group, is that what you're looking to confirm? And the assumptions in.
Here's what I really think. I think you guys have an agenda because you want to get it done soon. Our agenda is that we have to protect the wetlands. That's what we're here for. And so when we're telling you that we need a different kind of test and we have to hire somebody to do it, somebody that we trust and go over it. And frankly, as Ed said, he's gonna call Charlie and see what his perspective is. That's our job. That's really our only job. And so that's what we're protecting. We're not telling you not to do the project. I'm sorry that it may not happen on your timeline that way, but it is our job. We're trying to do our job to the best of our ability.
Understood, I appreciate that. It just feels like you're not necessarily listening to the peer reviewer.
Well, I read it.
And I just wanna make sure, I wanna make sure if we're going to do something, that we do what you're looking for and not, oh, you know, this piece, we gotta go back and another several months, like that. To be honest, that kind of feels like how we're, you know, at this junction, it'd be nice to.
I read it differently and I don't know who the peer is. I'm just.
It's Charlie.
No, I understand, but I don't know Charlie. So I read it differently than you did. And so we just want more information.
For me, it's the seasonality. No soil analysis has been done except during October to January. And he's suggesting that we may want to look at it in the spring. That to me is a good.
Again, I'm sorry to go back to this, but again, like, we're not trying to get around anything. We're trying to do exactly what needs to be done. And the suggestion, Maureen, of the email there too, what they were suggesting is that a condition that we do that is, you know, and that we're amenable to that. We're not trying to get away from, you know, doing that work and making sure that if there is anything different than what we see today, then we'll design around that. We're not trying to get around that. And that can be accomplished by adding the conditioning and making sure that we address that before we have to go to building permit, which is before we do the land construction. So that's where like, I think the disconnect is on.
But I think that that's not respectfully, I think the disconnect is that we are trying to do our job and you're trying to do yours. So when we're asking for more time, because we read this and it says that we should do a different soil analysis once the snow and the frost is gone. I mean, I can't plant anything now. The ground's too hard. So I think respectfully, I understand where you guys are coming from. But once we approve this, even with the condition, there's no going back. So we want to look at it again.
Sorry, I understood it a little confused on it. The condition itself is the check, right?
But it isn't. Approval is the check.
Why is it not? Like, what is the concern that we wouldn't actually comply with the condition?
So what happens if you comply with the condition after we've approved it, and something bad comes up? And the whole thing has to be changed, because the soil is different than what you thought, and the drainage is different.
We wouldn't be able to proceed until we actually did the
But
analysis.
what if it was so different that it wasn't worth it for you, then what happens?
Then.
Isn't this a caution for you too?
There's risk there for us, right? Like, if it's totally different, then like we have to redesign it significantly. We don't expect it to be so, and we're basing that off of the analysis that the third party consultant provided, as well as the third party peer review provided. We're taking that, being what it said, and we're saying like, if there is something vastly different, which is a very low likelihood scenario, we'll have to redesign based off of that. And we have to comply with that because it's a condition of the approval. We can't just like negate the condition.
I think we're just coming to a longer head over interpretation of the consultants and what they say. And I think we have the authority here. And we want to continue this hearing until we have that information, and that's what we're going to do. And there's no point arguing anymore about it, because that's what we want to do. And you should understand that and respect us for it. And by the way, we do appreciate that you addressed many of our concerns. It's done a fine job of doing that. I'm not going to negate that. But I think we have to do the last thing that's necessary, so we will feel comfortable. We have to answer the DCP, we have to answer the people in this town, too, not just, this is a small town. Everybody knows everybody here. We're responsible for our friends and our neighbors. That's how we look at it.
Yeah, and I totally understand that, again, just trying to be as efficient as we can be. And I understand you, obviously, to do what your job is.
All right. Understood. I think we have a couple of questions over there.
I just want to remind people, we've experienced a drought for the last couple of years. If we get normal rainfall, snow melt and everything else, that could skew every single report your guys even thought about. My other concern is having worked with various contractors before, if you're hiring the people to do any kind of testing, they're gonna feel beholden to coming up with your answers. Whereas I think we need the justification of having somebody that is not paid for by the applicant, just to make sure that everything really is truly unbiased. And what was the other thing? We've also, it seems like moving into doing this work in March instead of November is a huge change and kind of pushing things through. And in March, there's also supposed to be a new state commission coming in that could give us a lot more information that I think we really need. This is a huge undertaking for our very small town. And there was still question if there's an aquifer that could be damaged or upset. So all in all, I really think we need to go slowly. I don't.
You're talking about the small town, but this is also a precedent setting time for the state. So, I think if we set the precedent of taking every necessary step, that's gonna help other towns, and there are a lot of towns dealing with all of these issues. When I started reading about it, I was just amazed how many there are with very similar problems that we're facing or issues.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, some of the course of this project, 2 years back, the town did not believe the report that was generated on the wetland boundaries. So the town took it upon themselves to actually hire their own consultant. The map is the room next door. And after 30 extra inches of rain fall during the course of that year, the wetland map only grew by about 1 inch. So I understand that the perception of bias towards the client is theoretically there, but on the other hand, these people also have to answer to the DEP for their findings. And they could possibly lose their license and their livelihood for reporting falsely. So it just seems like every time there's a step forward for a project, the town has a rebuttal against the project not believing the information given. And as in the case of the wetland map, there was no difference even after the extra rainfall.
I'd like point out, Rod, that, we have had some educational workshop in which our representative, he has shown us some of the jobs that were not well done and were disasters. So we're a little bit skeptical about we're doing this and we're being extra careful. So you have to understand that you'll be a delay, but you'll still have your project. What, so bit of action.
There's also one of the previous ones that asked if you guys could produce where you would like to have soil samples taken, so we could put the insulation tarps out in case this situation arose. That way the analysis could be done and nothing moved forward. So here we are ahead again, trying to re-engineer the wheel and move forward.
Two things on that, that's not our responsibility. And secondly, the missing link for me is spring conditions. Can't replicate that by using instituted like right now. Spring conditions are gonna be different than any soil test that's been done with this.
So we're just talking about the surface layer of soil or 6 feet down.
The whole thing, all of them. And so as you pointed out, surface runoff, sedimentation, and what's going on underground, because that will tell us about permeability.
Yep.
That's the foundation of this whole project, and we don't have enough information yet.
Okay.
It's also really difficult at these times because we're facing unprecedented, weather conditions with climate change. They're all over the place and who knows what you're gonna find. And it's certainly gonna be different probably than 30 years ago, 20 years ago.
I just want to make one more comment. I don't really know why he's so resistant in producing detention basins that actually trap sediment. There's something behind that, and I don't know what it is, but I hope you reconsider that, please. Also, evapotranspiration was not mentioned at all. But evapotranspiration on a forested site is very significant. That is not going to be a forested site anymore, right? Evaporation and transpiration is not going to happen because the trees are going to be removed. All of the vegetation is going to be removed, except grasses that have a very short root system compared to trees. So it's critical that groundwater, not the water that you see down the hole, but how it fluctuates over the year has to be looked at. Now, those test pits that they did, GZA did, were very little narrow things, 7 feet into the ground. Nobody analyzed any of the long-term fluctuating characteristics of the soil that should build a basin on the street. Well, we took a look at that. And the idea that this trace sediment just nullified all my confidence in all of the data that they supplied by that particular person.
We need trace silt.
Trace silt.
Yeah.
Trace silt. I know it was good.
So there are no further comments.
But I mean, we don't need to do this right now, but we do want to make sure that whatever is being reflected is very, like, there's no misunderstanding of what you're asking, so you do exactly what you're asking, because we do this all the time. Test pits that you saw are very common. That's standard, partially constructed all over the Commonwealth that way. So that's not what you're wanting to know.
No, that's not what we want.
We want to know that, and maybe that's something that we work out between us and your peer reviewer or, you know, outside of this meeting, but I just wanted to make sure that at some point prior to this hearing.
I recall who did the flex. What was the GCA that did the delineation of the wetlands?
Yeah.
Was it?
Yes.
You know, they know how to do these things. They don't do test pits when they do those things. That's not how they do it.
Right, but they already did that. So you.
Around the weapons, they do, yeah.
Throughout the site.
Throughout this time, yeah, it's not the weapons that we're concerned about. The condition of the soils, it's throughout, where you're gonna be disturbing the soil and grading it and stumping. That's why you need that information. You don't do it with a test pit, you do it with an auger. You know what I'm talking about? I mean, you talk to a soil scientist about it, they know what they're doing, that's common.
Yes, I'm just trying, I guess, again, I'm trying to figure out what change, what data, how that would affect the project, and I think the answer is changing the assumptions on the hydrologic soil group of the site, that.
It could possibly, yeah, that's what, then you might have to redesign your project based upon the new information. That's what we want.
Right, because there's other ways to do that, we can run an analysis on every single, right, of 4 different soil groups, we could make an assumption on all 4 of them, run that model.
We're not talking about model, we're talking about real data from the ground.
I know, but the real data is just going to it's going to guide the assumptions.
Yeah, I know, you're using, programs and models, and it's only as good as the data you feed into them.
Right, but we can run 4 different versions, basically assuming it's gonna, the field data is gonna tell us one of the 4 of these options, and we can look at all 4 and design the most conservative option that, you know, not really go to spring to do that.
No, I don't think we're gonna do that.
But you know what? Assuming first. I'm not gonna say it out loud, but respectfully, he does know that, of course he does.
But so just theoretically, if we were to run the same version of this analysis with the worst possible soil that a field test could produce, and then still be able to produce a design that is able to mitigate that, then how would waiting till spring more?
So let's just say it again, the soil will be different in the spring.
But the soil will be, I don't know, mathematically, asymptotically bad. You pick a number. We run that number.
I don't think you're gonna change our minds on that.
I don't either. I just want to find some area of agreement on like the analysis that's gonna happen when we get these tests back.
First of all, that's not true. You could take the worst soil in the world and get nothing. You couldn't even construct on it. All right, so that's just not true. You know, what you're hypothetically you're pretty dealing with there just wouldn't work. Soil is soil, and it's not like engineers know a lot about soil. They don't. That's why soil scientists know a lot about soil, and that's what nobody who is the soil scientist looked at that soil. Nobody, that was a soil scientist in the test pits that day.
We're saying we're done with hypotheticals.
Okay.
Modeling is only as good as what you put into them. No one has gone out there with an auger in the spring to give us the data we like. No one's done that.
Maybe it'll give you guys time to figure out whether you wanna run the project and maybe the time is good for you too.
Can we be understanding that, you know, that assuming that the worst case scenario is not the direction that you want to go. Can we be explicit now about what the scope that you're looking for in this radius?
I think we can divide something between now and then with some advice from people who will let you know.
Yeah,
We don't have that information right now, so.
We're not.
I think if you would work with like Unpro,
Sure.
to produce the scope that
I
they provide to
understand.
us.
You need something concrete that you can work on, that's what we want to do.
Understood, so just, you're hopeful that we can close the book on that tonight, but it sounds like that's something that you're committed to. But understanding if we do that additional work and we're able to design accordingly, whether it's exactly what we have here today or something slightly different. Sounds like, I'll check the box.
Well, we're gonna have a list of conditions for it.
But in line with what we talked about today, anything else?
With the potential for learning more about the sedimentation aspects. They're kind of related, but they're two different issues that we need to learn more about. We're not soil engineers either. We need to consult with people also to feel better about approving as it is.
But thank you for all the changes you made.
Absolutely.
We appreciate that.
Those have to be listened. We appreciate that.
We can provide more information on Kevin, in the intro, or when we resubmit.
That would get him off our case.
Jack, I think with the, the right,
I've actually gone pretty lightly on this.
with the right discussions with Gutlow as to what they reviewed, now I think it's really, to Ed's point, taking a look at the overall contour and those basins, and again, questioning sedimentation. If they're reviewed that might be part of their specific focus in the commentary that they gave to you. Because I did think that we were moving to an approval. With these questions that were brought up, it just makes sense to get another round of analysis from them.
One other question as far as what constitutes spring, so obviously we would like to do it just move for snow melts. Maybe this is something that can be part of this scope document, but just clarifying what time frame would be acceptable, or if it's time of the year would be acceptable. Again, we'd like to do that soil analysis if that's exactly what.
I think it snowed in April last year, just so you know.
Well, sometimes we get, sometimes it melts, gets you, see the ground again.
Well, we also have to get the ground not frozen, so it's not just the snow melt.
Right.
You have to be able to get in there too, so.
But sometimes I think that would be acceptable.
Yeah.
If it happened earlier.
Sure, how many bills?
We should have a snow again after the.
It's coming up soon.
What, folks, that he's saying, we'll wait till folks at Connie Bill help us, we will look at that.
Yeah. Training talk. We'll have to tell you, me later here, in a random.
Okay.
Sorry, ready to end the hearing, because we had.
The meeting.
Close the meeting.
Yes, I go that we conclude the meeting for now.
Second.
8:17.
Thank you all.
Thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
Yes.
Everybody, you guys, oh, I just want to. Thank you.
I didn't get that. You have.
And then-
Oh, I'm. And we're.